Welcome aboard to the Thursday edition of Locked On NHL with your hosts from the Stanley Cup final. Locked On Lightning, Mr. Adam Denker. I am Chris Maselli from Locked On Avalanche. And on today's Thursday episode, which we are finally back for, the Stanley Cup is over. We all know how that went. And Adam and I are back on our Thursday time slot. A little bit late for the Thursday night, but we're here. We got some things to talk about. We are going to talk about that Stanley Cup. I know it's a few days removed, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who want to move on from that. But because we just happened to host the Thursday episode and both our teams were in it, we're going to kind of give a summary of how it all went down and how we're feeling and how things are going with the Avalanche just finishing up their parade today, which was pretty much out of control, but entertaining. We have a Kevin FIala trade to get to and a coach from Mr. Denker's Locked On Lightning has been hired. Where did he go? And you know what? I said I wasn't going to do this, but I'm gonna because the Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup. We're starting with their graphic instead of the Locked On NHL. Here we go.
Your Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Locked On NHL is now Locked On Avalanche just for today. No, it's not. Were you saying something? Because you were muted when you were trying to talk.
I'm so sick of that intro. I'm over it. I'm over it.
Well, the funny thing is, like when we were doing crossovers, we had like a deal that, you know, whoever won would kind of like be the host and that intro would run. And the way that things kind of lined up, you only got to really run your intro one time.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel bad about that.
It's upsetting.
But welcome to the Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, everybody. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. That's always appreciated. And like we said in the intro, on today's episode, we're going to discuss that final between my team and his team, and a lot of other things to get to. Coaching hire, trades going down. The offseason has picked up immediately, and you don't have a lot of time. It's a little bit shorter offseason. So let's get to the Stanley Cup, man, because that's still fresh in everybody's minds. I'll let you go first. The Avalanche prevent the Tampa Bay Lightning from hanging that dynasty label on themselves. How are things going in Tampa land right now?
Well, first of all, congratulations. And second of all, the dynasty is not over.
I did so much for it. So
as Steven Stamkos said in his exit interview, we're not done. This doesn't mean,
that's a good point.
We're not, and I think in today's salary cap NHL, I think we have to look at dynasty a certain way. We look at the Blackhawks and the Penguins as somewhat dynasty, especially those Blackhawks teams. And they won one every other year or something like that. They pulled the San Francisco Giants sort of. But no, I think obviously it's disappointing. And I think a lot of Lightning fans are disappointed, but we're not heartbroken over it just because the team won 2 in a row in 2 of probably the most intense NHL postseasons in the last 100 years or so. And I think we're more excited for the offseason. I think with a lot of the moves that need to be made, a lot of the players that you might see going, there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around some of the moves that the front office is going to make, and throwing it at you. How are you feeling? Because I mean, we've only been known each other for the NHL part where I've been on cloud 9, and now the roles are reversed. So what are you feeling like? Because usually we handle things, and a lot of the people that are maybe hopping on the show for the first time and listening to us, whether it be during this postseason or just this year, I'm usually very, very insufferable over the last 2 years. Whereas it seems like Chris, at least here and there, has been able to have some sort of humility during this championship run. But yeah, how are you feeling with all of this?
I mean, when you haven't won it in 21 years, like you're gonna, have a little bit of fun gloating about it. I mean, we've been talking ever since we got hooked up with Locked On that it would be fun if both our teams were in the Cup final, and then it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it was enjoyable. And for me, I told Kyle this on our show, this one right here, you're not going to have this specific feeling if they do it again next year, or if they do it
Yeah.
again in 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? Like, there was such a big gap between championships.
Yeah.
People were born and are now legally able to drink in the time frame that the Avalanche won their last one to this one. So you know how you felt. Well, I mean, the Lightning, when was the one they won before? What year was that?
04.
Okay, so
And
that's a
technically,
good amount
they were champions for 2 years because the lockout was the next year. So,
Oh,
the
that's
Lightning.
semantics, man. Wow. Wow. But but when you go that long, like, that feeling, you just forget how it feels to win a championship. So
Yeah.
how you if the Lightning had won a third in a row, I mean, it's just, I think, inevitable that you're still going to have excitement. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. It's the best trophy in sports, but how you felt on the first one, it's not how you're going to feel on the third one, especially in a row. After the third one, you're going to feel like we're invincible.
Yeah.
So how they are right now, how Avalanche fans are right now,
Yeah.
their heads are in the cloud right now, and they have every reason to be. This team was the favorite, or one of the favorites,
Yeah.
going into the regular season, and so much weight on their shoulders because of what happened in playoffs past in the past few years, and for them to overcome it and win, so much of that pressure and that weight is off of them now. And I'm really looking forward to next year, because they're not going to be playing with that, like, what if we don't mentality. Now they can just go out and play. I'm not saying they didn't, but it's going to be fun to watch them follow this up, knowing that it's going to be a different team. They have a lot of unrestricteds, but the core is still together. So I'm looking forward to next year already.
Well, we were texting back and forth the other night. I told you the first one is the hardest one to win out of the two. So, now you guys have a ton of momentum. I even if you aren't able to sign half of the guys that are coming off the books this postseason, I mean this offseason, whoever you bring in is going to be able to ease in, because there's not that pressure of, I'm the new guy, I got to help this team win a championship for the first time in X amount of years. Now it's just like, all right, like, these guys know what to do. Let me just kind of lean on them a bit and just ride the gravy train. So you're in a perfect spot. I think, a lot of people like to keep championship teams together. I saw with last year, at least, when the Lightning were going for their second in a row, that the new guys were able to settle in a lot faster, just because there wasn't that added pressure, and the confidence level was high up. And you also have that not as much fatigue as we saw. You kind of had the same group this year with Tampa, to some degree, except for a couple of faces. But, there's also that as well, where you kind of get a refreshed group of talented players coming in ready to roll. So you're in a prime spot right now. Listen, I mean, you guys, it wasn't like, a lot can be made about the officiating in this series, but at the end of the day, you guys were just talented. We're just way more talented on the ice, and when it mattered, that third period. I was listening to your show the other day when I was stuck on when I was a victim to the MTA incompetence here on the subway, and you made a good point that I mean, you were talking about it, and I try to straight away from this on my show, but that third period, man. I mean, after the way you guys shut the Lightning down in the first 10 minutes, I mean, at that point, I was not even mad. Like, I just knew that there's no way this Lightning team's going to be able to get anything going. And especially now with all the injuries coming to light, it makes a lot more sense that, if the Lightning weren't going to get anything done in the first 10, then, the game was pretty much over by then.
Yeah, it was third period that they just went on lockdown. It was great. I mean, if you're an Avalanche fan, it was fun to watch. But I think the questions for the Avs are obviously in the free agents, namely Nazem Kadri, who's going to kind of overpay to go get him. There's going to be teams out there that do. I think they really want to bring back Val Nichushkin, and I think that they will. And then, even in your restrictions with our Arturi Lehkonen, like he was, that was a great pickup for Joe Sakic. And his other pickup in Josh Manson, he's an unrestricted free agent. I just don't anticipate him staying around. So it's one of those things where like these moves that he made ended up in what you want it to end up with, which is a Stanley Cup. And now those pieces might be going in different directions. You're going to hang on to a couple of them, but I don't know if you're going to hang on to all of them. And you might even might. And did you notice Eric Johnson took a few laps around the Tampa rink by himself, like an hour or so after everybody had left?
Yeah.
That's a little bit telling to me. He's got one more year left on his contract. If he retires, that's $6 million that comes off the books that goes into their cap. And that only helps them maybe sign somebody, can throw an extra million or something to Nazem Kadri. So
could also
it'll be an eventful offseason for them.
Could also be a door opener, and I know my listeners are going to hate this, and then we'll jump on to something else, but could be also a door opener for Andre Palat. If he's unable, who becomes a UFA, he's looking towards out Colorado and saying.
I thought you were going to say you put up a screenshot of someone who wants to get rid of Vasilevsky already, like.
Oh, well, we'll address it at the end of the show because I have thoughts on that. But yeah, the Lightning with that as well. They have a lot of decisions to make. Of course, there was one person on Twitter that thinks that the Lightning should trade Vasilevsky, but it's a whole nother conversation for later in the show. But the news broke today that the Lightning are actively speaking with Ryan McDonough to work out a deal to possibly trade him to clear up some cap space. Alex Killorn might be leaving. You have Jan Ruda as a UFA. You have Andre Palat as a UFA, and you have Nick Paul as well. So just a lot of quality guys. Some guys that I wouldn't mind if they let walk, and some other guys that need to make necessarily moves to either keep them or give them away for some assets. So listen, both teams that are at the peak of their powers right now in the NHL, and it's so funny how they both have the same issues. We're not talking about a team who won the cup and they have all this cap room to play with. Now it's just like, how can they keep the talent together instead of trying to improve themselves?
Offseason is here, and it's going to be fun for both these teams and so many other teams. But we wanted to talk about it and kind of put a bow on it for us because we didn't do a crossover after the Stanley Cup was over. So we're using the Locked On NHL vehicle to do that for now, and why not? It's the greatest trophy in sports, and people kind of talk about it for a while. And because there are teams, ironically, we had to talk about it. And like I said on my show, I think we did it on the crossover. I'm just happy that there's a different champ in the Locked On world when it comes to the NHL, and it's not just solely Adam Denker, because it has been. So thank you for passing the mantle, sir. I appreciate that.
Just keep it warm until next year. And I'll come grab it back from you.
Fighting words, my man. All right, we're gonna hear from Bet Online and then get into a trade that we had, kind of a big one. So betonline.net, your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including the Major League Baseball season, which when's the All-Star game for that? Isn't that
second week of July?
So that's coming up. So you can probably put some scratch down on a home run derby, I'm assuming. They haven't announced those guys yet, have they?
No, but I would assume Pete Alonso, maybe some Aaron Judge action.
Judge is going to do it. I don't know. Guys like him, they do it once, they win it, and they never do it again.
Maybe Ohtani. Maybe Ohtani's going to pitch to himself in the home run derby. So definitely put some scratch on that. You could
probably go bet on that if you want to. It's your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting and esports. And betonline.net remains your best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news for this season. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today to use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. It's betonline.net. It's where the game starts. A trade which happened between the Minnesota Wild and Los Angeles Kings that sent the big name in this deal is Kevin FIala to the Los Angeles Kings. And it's funny, man, because like when your team's in the Stanley Cup final, you kind of tune out everything else that's going on around the league, which normally I'm always involved with everything that's going on around the league. But I was just like I was in so much Stanley Cup mode. I wasn't as in tune to what was going on with, like coaching hires and stuff like that. But I was hearing, rumblings of this but I never heard the Kings. I
Yeah.
was hearing Ottawa as one team, and there was another team I was hearing a lot of, and I can't remember who it was, so I don't want to just guess and be wrong. But Ottawa was the team I kept hearing was like the front runner to get
Yeah.
him. And then I don't know if the Kings just came out of nowhere or if they were always involved in this, but just kind of reading some people's posts, seems like it was a little bit of a surprise. And then they immediately signed him to a 7-year deal.
Yeah, I think this is a great trade for the Kings. Obviously, they have a good group of young players that are ready to compete. And then adding Kevin FIala, who, by the way, has skyrocketed to one of my favorite players in the league this year, just because I drafted him late in my NHL fantasy draft, and he made me look like a genius.
Oh my God.
And and yeah, he had a fantastic season this year. 33 goals and 85 points, and only 25 years old. And it was you kind of got the feeling, and I'm sure you know this better than I do, being in the Western Conference, that the Wild weren't going to pony up the money. That's just not something they do out there. And so he got 7 years, 55 mil, deservingly so. And now he's on a team where he could be the guy, but not have to do too much to help that team succeed. Whereas kind of with the Wild, he was kind of doing pretty much everything just to keep them in games at certain points. But yeah, no, this was a good trade. I was as shocked as you were when I heard the Kings were involved. I heard somewhere from a friend of mine who's somewhat in the know. They were saying Washington was trying to cheap its way out and to get into that, but I can't see Washington be able to pay his salary. But how does this change, if at all? How does this change the landscape of the Western Conference?
I mean, the Kings got better. That's for
Yeah.
sure. You know what I mean? And I think it's a smart move by the Kings are kind of, and they've someone admitted this, like they were taking a page out of the Avalanche playbook on how to turn things around relatively quickly.
Yeah.
But the Avalanche I don't think they ever really did anything like this. You know what I mean? They made some trade. They traded for Kadri, but he was going to be their second line center from the day that they got him.
Yeah.
But the Avs like built through the draft, made some smart trades, and that's kind of what they really like just solidified their minor league system basically. And that's kind of what LA was doing, and they drafted well so far, and they make a move like this after having the season that they had last year where they really overachieved and made the playoffs, which nobody thought that they were going to do. They're kind of saying like, okay, like we can't go backwards now, so we can't sit still, and that means making a move like this. And I'm reading right now on NHL.com, and Bill Guerin pretty much said he knew he was going to have to trade him.
Yeah.
They had him on a 1-year deal last year to avoid arbitration, and he said he knew he was going to have to trade him. He said, "Yes, I did." He had 85 points. The kid is a great player. We don't have the cap space, honestly, to keep him. We'd have to trade 3 guys or 2 guys and deplete our team even more. So I think they clearly don't want to do it. But they had to. And the Kings are I mean, they were legit anyway, and to do something like this, and this is the start of, we haven't even got to free agency yet. I don't know what their cap, let me bring up their caps.
And while you're looking that
is.
up, I'm curious as to, any Wild fans out there. I'm sure you're disappointed with letting Kevin FIala go, but we've spoken about it a little bit here on Locked On NHL. The Wild, it always seems like they have a team to a good base to be competitive, and they never want to take that next step. And I'm sure as a Wild fan, and I've spoken briefly with Seth Tupel of Locked On Wild, and if I can't wait to hear the episode that he puts out talking about this, because I'm sure he's going to have some probably not nice things to say.
Yeah.
But I would imagine this is immensely frustrating for Wild fans, where it seemed there for like a little bit that things were starting to trend in the right direction. You got a new GM. He was starting to make some really good moves. Kaprizov is the face of the franchise. And then you trade you trade away one of your top players. Yeah, you got some nice pieces in it, but you trade them away, essentially saying, we don't want to keep this guy around because we don't want to pay him. And I understand you want to kind of start from scratch there, but in a way, also, I look at it, if I was a Wild fan, you're sort of wasting the early years of Kaprizov. And imagine those two guys, Fiala and Kaprizov, on this team and building this Wild team in the West around those two guys.
So I'm on the Kings cap friendly. It's interesting for them. And like they have, I'll round up $100,000 to $12 million. They have $12 million in cap space. Wow. But they need to sign 7 guys to fill out a roster. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it obviously can be done. I think, your big guys are signed, so it's not like you have any. I mean, if there's any big names that are out there.
All right. Well, put on your GM cap right for a minute, Chris, because you're more familiar with the West and you're more familiar with the Kings than I am. If you're the Kings GM right now, with having that number in mind, where do you go next? Where are your needs that you need to fill up? I mean, because Ante Kopitar is still pretty effective out there. You have a good couple of first lines out there. Quentin Byfield is starting to come into his own. Jonathan Quick, I think you still have a couple of good years out of him before you really have to consider maybe doing the goalie shuffle out there in LA. But where do you go from there? Are you going out for a D-man? Are you kind of trying? Are you trying to? Well, here's my thing, because I look at this Kings team, and I really think about what can I do in the offseason to improve us, obviously. And I always look, at least for me, I look at the Drew Doughty contract and think, if this wasn't on the books, what could we do with this? And obviously, there's not going to be a team out there that's going to be crazy enough to pick up this contract. But what is the biggest obstacle for the Kings, at least in free agency, to kind of take that next step after getting Kevin FIala?
Well, you look at you touched on it, is their defense. Yeah. They, a lot of their free agents on the forward end are all restricted. Yeah. The only one that's not is Antonizeau. He's the only one that's not. He's unrestricted. Everybody else is restricted. So you can kind of sign those. I mean, you're going to be able to sign those guys. It should be. I don't see anybody that's really going to soak up a ton. On the defensive end, it's pretty slim. Yeah, it's pretty slim for the Kings on the defensive side. Wow. I mean, there's 4 guys signed. 3 of them are less than $900,000 a year. So that's a young, and here's the ages: 21, 21, 23. And then you have Matt Roy, who's at 27. So that's a young defensive core. So they need to find somebody, but you're really not going to have a lot of money to do that. So, I mean, they're good, and they'll get like these restricted free agents to kind of, fleshed out and signed. Yeah. But I don't see them making another big move. So, I mean, this is really the first time I'm looking at their cap situation after the season's over. And I think that's going to be the talking point going into next year for them. Defense is going to be tough.
Yeah, and I'm looking at their prospect list. This is via NHLrumors.com. This was the most updated list I could find. And they do have Brant Clark, but defenseman from the OHL, but he is 18. So obviously that's kind of not in the cards right now for them. But you do have Sean Durse from the Ontario Reign in the NHL, 6 feet, 185 pounds, 23 years old. So, maybe this is where, if you're the Kings, you kind of look within the organization and say, why don't we give the young kids a try at the defensive level? And yeah, that could be a little risky, having a lot of young guys on the back end. But that's why you keep the cap space, because you could always at least make that move during the regular season to pick up a vet or two.
Here's the other thing that's an issue. You have Drew Doughty.
Yeah.
Is he on LTIR or just IR?
Well, let's just call what it is.
He's just on IR.
Let's call what it is. Yeah. The worst contract in the NHL.
It's tough, man. Yeah. That's a tough one. He's soaking up $11 million per until 2027.
Unbelievable.
And I've always liked Drew Doughty.
Yeah.
I've always liked that guy, but man, that's going to be a tough contract as the years go on. So we'll see what happens with the Kings and the Wilds. You're right with the Wild. They always seem to be there, though. They always seem to figure things out and be in the mix as the season progresses. So All right. What else we got? We have one of your assistants is no longer there with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Let me bring up the article. Tell me about this guy. He's an assistant that is going to the Detroit Red Wings, and it's kind of like some home cooking, if you ask me, for the Wings.
Yeah, Derek Lalonde. He's been the assistant with the Lightning for the last couple of years now, and a lot of people taking no no credit away from John Cooper, who's done a fabulous job with the Lightning. But you always feel, and at least for me, who I watch this team on a nightly basis, so I see a lot more. You kind of see if you've watched the Lightning game, especially in the nitty gritty moments of games, tough games. John Cooper always kind of leans on Derek Lalonde. You always see Derek Lalonde in the huddle, drawing up plays between timeouts, between whistles, and this was not a shock though. This was kind of something that, as Lightning fans, they should not feel any sort of surprisement, because this is a Steve Yzerman guy. He was with the Lightning when Steve Yzerman was the GM. Derek Lalonde's name has been floated over the last couple of years as someone who's probably going to be a head coach at some point in the NHL. This is his first NHL gig. He's had coaching stints in the AHL, the ECHL, the USHL. So obviously the show is a little bit different, but he's very deserving of the role. And I think that Red Wing fans should be very excited. You're going to get a guy who's just as well-rounded and very high-minded as John Cooper, who also is going to be able to mold his system to what Steve Yzerman wants, since there's that familiarity.
I mean, I can't fault them for hiring a first-time head coach, because look where it's gotten the Avalanche. You know what I mean? Like, and he and Bednar was in the AHL.
Yeah.
So, they plucked him from that. Here's a guy that's been on the bench with Cooper, and this is what happens. I mean, you have good teams who have good runs, and other teams start plucking the assistants away. But I mean, I'm not going to sit here and or admit that I know anything about him. I really don't. But you kind of have to trust what Yzerman's doing up there. And you feel like he's going to have a good career up there. I mean, they're set up they're progressing a little bit slower than a team like we were just talking about in the Kings.
Yeah.
But I think people are happy with their progress. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the guy that they need to just, get them over that, bring in a different face, bring in a different system. I'm sure Yzerman looked at the talent he has and said, who's the best guy I can bring in to capitalize on this?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are going to look at it and say, like, well, just because he was there when Yzerman was there and he hired him, and they're going to look at it. I don't think Yzerman's going to do that just to hire a buddy of his. I think he's going to hire the right guy, and he probably got him.
Well, I think the one thing that Lalonde brings, because we're always hearing these conversations, can this guy come in and relate to the youth that's on the team, or can this guy be able to rally the vets around to really be the leaders on this team? And Lalonde has had a mix of that over the last few years with the Lightning, young with the old, the inexperience with the experience. And I think that's what he's going to be able to bring to the table, is to be able to have that ability to get guys on the team to mesh together like that, to put it out on the ice and be able to perform. And I think, obviously it's not going to turn out, the Red Wings aren't going to win the Cup anytime soon. Let's be honest here. But I think the next two, I think not this year, but the year after. So year 2, I think is going to be very telling of where Lalonde is and if he's up to the task. Because this year, I think, there's still a couple more pieces that need to be added with the Red Wings. But I think that this was the best possible choice for the Red Wings at this point in time.
I think he's got a 3-year window, man.
Yeah.
Because I think Red Wing fans are getting a little impatient, a little bit. I think they're trusting the process, and fine. All right, you want to go get you've gotten the players.
Yeah.
You're going to continue to get players, obviously, and they might have a really good offseason when it comes to free agents.
Yeah.
There's some names that you're hearing that might go there. If they can nail this free agent period and maybe next year's and get good draft picks, and the draft picks that you've already made come up, and they've developed a little bit more. And now you have the brand new head coach. And sometimes that is what the team needs to just, get to the next level. If it doesn't happen in 3 years where I'm not saying win the Cup, but see significant progress where you are competing for at least like Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
And I know that's a big ask because they haven't sniffed that stuff for years. But I just feel like the Red Wings have been given the benefit of the doubt for so many years to keep this thing progressing. And it is. And if you ask me, it's at a little bit slower pace than if I was a Red Wing fan, I'd be happy with.
Yeah.
I understand it. But okay, like what other moves do you need to make now? You know what I mean? Like how, if this guy doesn't work out, and I'm not saying it is, and I wish him luck, and I would assume with all the talent you have there, you can get there relatively quickly. But what if it doesn't? Red Wing fans just have to throw their hands up and just say, like, what else do we need? What else can possibly come in here to turn this thing around? I don't know. But it's going to be a fun thing to watch over the course of the next couple seasons, because let's admit it, I'm an Avalanche fan. The league is better when the Red Wings are competitive. It just is.
Yeah, you say that because they're not in the West anymore, so you don't have to worry about them playing in your division either. Where they're,
true.
But
you deal with them.
I'm probably one last point to add to that, but I think if you're Steve Yzerman, and this might be a little too out of the box, but if I'm Steve Yzerman, I think I go a little bit aggressive in free agency. I don't make stupid decisions. I don't misuse my money. But maybe you make a phone call to Johnny Gaudreau's agent and test the waters a little bit. Maybe say, hey, you want to be part of the up and coming here in Detroit and play for an original six team? And I know you and we don't really put a lot of stock into that, but there are people that really, you float the phrase original six towards them, and that means something. So who knows? Maybe Stevie Y will shock the world and make a big free agent signing this offseason.
I've been hearing Malkin to Detroit.
I also heard Giroux, so I don't know. Giroux, excuse me. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But that's not. That's a good. That would be a good signing. But come on, like he's getting to the end of the road here. But even Malkin, I mean, he's 35. That would be a good signing for to bring in a good.
That'd be good. Yeah, that'd be good, like a good 2-year contract
that can still play. Let's get real here. Like he would be one of the best guys on that team. They have a lot of good young talent, but he's coming in with a lot of experience. If that would happen, we'll see. I love this time of year. I love the draft. I love free agency. Even if the Avs might lose some guys and not sign as many, I still love it. I love seeing the dynamic of teams moving around and trying to like fortify their rosters and become a player again, like guys like the Red Wings. So all right, man, that's gonna wrap it up for today. We are back at our normal Thursday time slot. And we'll be back next week. Anything's happening around the league, you can rest assured that we will be discussing it. I don't think we're going to do any. We always did the power ranking thing on Thursday, but there's no use to do that. But we will have the argument. We can finally have the argument. Should the Avs be number one going into next year? We love that conversation. I love it. So thank you for tuning in and making this your first listen of the day, everybody. That is always appreciated. You can follow me over at the LOPN_Avalanche Twitter page and Locked On Avalanche on Twitter and our YouTube channel. And where can they find the next mixtape?
The next mixtape's at Danky Dank, DENKYDANK. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel for Locked On Lightning. We have a ton to unpack in the coming weeks about what the Lightning need to do. Should they re-sign their vets? Should they invest in their young guns that they have up in the minors? And just a lot to unpack. And they finally have a first-round draft pick for the first time in a couple of seasons.
Right?
Yeah, they traded away for Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow. So lot to unpack. So excited to see what happens in the coming weeks, and hopefully the Lightning will have some money to pay the bills. So
keep the lights on.
Keep the lights on.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in again. It's always appreciated, and we will see you guys next Thursday.